Yeah. I'm Liza Anderson. I'm a Christian and a member of the Episcopal Church. I became a Christian in college, and it was really kind of a horrible accident. I'd really been sort of always very religious as a child. I believed passionately in all of the entire pantheon of ancient Greek gods and goddesses. And I was actually fairly convinced that I was probably the illegitimate child of Apollo and a mountain nymph, and I'd been abandoned with this family in rural Michigan. Um, but I didn't really have a particular religious tradition of my own. Like many people as a young adult, I was a seeker. And when I became a Christian in college, it was because I spent my junior year of college studying abroad in Egypt. And I really fell head over heels in love with the Coptic Church. But I was really very chagrined and embarrassed because I'd spent all of these years studying all of these different world religions. And then it's like, really, Liza, you can't come up with something a little more exciting than being an Episcopalian? Like, this is what we've got. But I really ended up as an Anglican just because the Anglican Church in Egypt was the English-speaking church. And I'm normally the kind of person who would have gone through all kinds of anxiety about if I'm going to be Christian, which denomination. I have to think this through theologically. And I really had no choice because I wanted to understand what was going on in the service. And so I went to the only English-speaking church I could find. Sure. Well, one of the things that I have come to realize for myself is that while I love interfaith work, it's actually the ecumenical work within Christianity that's by far the more difficult. Because I've found that with interfaith work, there's enough distance that it can actually be quite comfortable and that you can learn from one another without feeling threatened by the other. Jonathan Z. Smith talks about sort of the proximate other and how it's the other who's actually very close to you that can be the more threatening because it undermines your own identity. And so for me, the harder struggles of the religious other are not people of other religions, but frankly, people within my own church. So I'll come to interfaith gatherings and we can appreciate each other's differences and share all kinds of things. And it's not threatening at all. It's wonderful. And then, I go to gatherings of the Episcopal Church and we have passionate discussions about, the meaning of the second half of the sentence on page 37. And I'm like many people within my church, deeply opinionated about the proper way to do liturgy, which is, of course, the 1549 Book of Common Prayer. No other Book of Common Prayer will possibly do. And so for me, actually, that's been the more challenging. And in some ways, the interfaith can be a welcome reprieve from that. Probably my best experiences have been with Muslims during my time studying in the Middle East. I just came back 2 days ago from Yemen, and the hospitality that we encountered there daily during Ramadan was incredible. I mean, there was not a single day that I didn't have a dinner invitation for iftar. And, also the experience of fasting with Muslims for Ramadan in a Muslim country was really, really fantastic. But for me, that was not at all a threatening experience of difference, but really a very healing one. Yeah. So. Yeah. I mean, I do think that in many parts of the world, and to some extent still in the US, religion still has a certain kind of moral authority, certainly more than our political leaders have. And so there is a greater willingness to listen when religious leaders speak. But I'm also deeply wary about turning religion into something instrumental or using it as a means to an end. Because ultimately I feel like it always has to be an end in itself, and it may help you towards certain means of greater justice and equality and peace, but that can never be the reason why. I think that interfaith work has the most credibility when it's willing to acknowledge that religious differences are hard and that religious peace building truly does involve a lot of blood, sweat, and tears for those who are actually in the midst of conflict. And I've had positive and negative experiences of interfaith work, and the ones that I really have no time or tolerance for at all are the fluffy ones. I've been to other gatherings, for example, where we're expected to hold hands and sing fluffy songs about how we're all following the golden rule. And it's kind of like, well, that's great. But I think anyone who's ever lived in a situation of true sectarian strife or violence of any kind, there has to be the realization that this work is hard. And I feel like it only has the credibility when it's willing to be hard and doesn't want to just stay on the surface area of platitudes and empty statements that make one feel good, but that doesn't ultimately address the hard issues.